The Safari Adventure is the most northerly park of Nuka World. As we get close, we see a man in a loincloth going mano a mano with some sort of crazy bipedal lizard creature. If we choose to help this man, we discover that what he's fighting is a Gatorclaw. This character is only level 28. She's far too young for this place. She really shouldn't be here. But with this loincloth-clad man, we were able to kill this horrendous monster. After the creature is dead, Cito approaches us.
Lady, Cito see you kill monster. You friend?
As always, we have the option to be hostile to this man.
I don't have time for this, pal. I got raiding to do.
You no friend. You bad lady. Cito kill you.
In which case, we now have to fight Cito. Cito is very difficult. If I thought that Gatorclaw was tough, Cito was tougher. But after some time and a judicial use of chems, I was finally able to decimate him. On his body, we find Dr. McDermot's journal 91W, which we'll explore later, Cito's key, which opens the front door to the Safari Adventure Primate House, and the Wildman Rags, a unique armor piece that increases the wearer's strength by 2 and increases melee damage. On men, it is just the loincloth, but on women, it also comes with a hairy hide tank top, much like the Grognak costume. But let's pretend for a moment that we're not murderous sociopaths, and we don't want to kill Cito as soon as we meet him. Instead, after the fight, we can ask him if he's okay.
Are you okay? Why are you talking like that?
Cito sorry, Cito not talk good. Cito family not talk. Cito not talk to man or lady in long time.
Oh, God. Let me guess. You were raised by apes.
Not no ape. Cito only know family.
Sure. We can be friends.
Cito happy have strong friend. You kill monster alone. Monster strong, but you stronger. Cito happy you kill monster. Monster hurt Cito and Cito family.
What the heck are those things? Are they some sort of a death claw?
Death? Claw? Cito not know. Cito only know death bad and monster bad.
I have a bad feeling you're gonna ask me to kill more.
You good guesser.
Can't believe you couldn't handle that thing yourself.
Not one monster. Many monsters.
Well, it can't hurt you anymore, Cito.
No. Many more monster. No stop. Cito kill monster. New monster come. Cito kill monster again. New monster come again. Monsters not stop. Help Cito stop monsters?
That depends. What are you offering in return?
New friend make monsters stop. Cito promise shiny thing give new friend. Help Cito?
Maybe. Do you have any idea where they're coming from?
Cito not know.
I knew this would be a pain in the ass.
Cito not doctor. Maybe find medicine for ass while help Cito?
Of course. I'll help.
Cito happy you help. New friend, follow Cito. Cito show you thing. Thing to help kill monsters.
With that, Cito leads us off to meet his family. If that conversation seemed a little disjointed to you, it's because I wanted to explore every dialogue option. I'll do that for all of the conversations we have with Cito, so my character may sound like she's being cruel at times, but that's just because I wanted to show you what the cruel options were. As we continue along, Cito leads us through a big broken cage. On the other side, we meet another Gatorclaw. I knew going into this that I was going to have a hard time, but I didn't appreciate exactly how difficult these Gatorclaws were going to be for a strictly melee character. Even pulling out my deliverer didn't help. These Gatorclaws are really tough. I discovered that if I don't get my initial sneak attack bonus, I don't win the fight. It took me a few tries, but I was finally able to kill this Gatorclaw.
Cito strong.
With Cito's help, of course. After the Gatorclaw is dead, Cito unlocks the door to the primate house. Inside the primate house, we see Cito standing amongst a bunch of gorillas and a baby carriage.
This home. This family. No worry. They not hurt you. You friend Cito. Mean you friend family.
How did you end up being raised by these gorillas?
Cito no tell. Story make sad. Cito very small when first family die. First family look like Cito. Cito not die. Just walk and walk. Find zoo place. Find new family. New family help Cito. Give Cito food. Give water. Keep Cito safe. Now Cito big and strong. Cito help family fight monsters.
Great. I always wanted to be best friends with a bunch of gorillas.
Cito glad new friend like family.
Are you kidding me? This isn't your family. These are animals.
Animal? Cito not know word.
Yeah. You have a lovely family, Cito.
You say nice thing. Cito like new friend. Now you help Cito. Family in danger. Hide here from monsters. Here only place safe. Here have no food. Here have no water. Cito go outside to help family. Monster try to kill Cito. Cito kill many. More monsters come. Never stop. Cito scared monster hurt family.
Why bring me here then?
Listen to Cito.
I hope you know somewhere to start.
Cito maybe know.
Just get to the part where you tell me how to kill them.
New friend not talk. New friend listen.
It's okay, Cito. We'll take care of your family.
Cito like new friend. Cito have story. Story help stop monsters. Cito eat with family. Wrinkly man come inside home. Wrinkly man hurt. Cito try help. Wrinkly man say he make monsters. Cito mad at Wrinkly man. Monsters hurt family. Wrinkly man sorry monsters hurt family. He give Cito shiny thing. He say shiny thing help Cito stop monsters. Cito try help more, but Wrinkly man die. Cito put Wrinkly man in ground, but keep shiny thing. Now give shiny thing new friend. Help Cito.
After the conversation, Cito gives us the holotape that we found on his corpse earlier. This holotape belonged to the old wrinkly man whom Cito met, the man who claimed to be responsible for the Gatorclaw outbreak, Dr. McDermot.
This is Dr. Darren McDermott, last known survivor at the Safari Adventure Replication Facility. This is my final recording. I've done something horrible. The thing I created, the thing I called the Gatorclaw, they must be destroyed. They can't be tamed. They can't be controlled. Their sheer ferocity is like nothing I've ever seen. And now, the Nuka Gen replicator is out of control. It's producing them at an alarming rate. Please, somebody, anybody, find my passcode or Dr. Hines. Shut down the replicator before it's too late. And if this recording should reach Dr. Hines, please tell him to forgive me.
While exploring the primate house, we found a mattress in the corner. This must be Cito's bed. On a crate near his bed is Cito's note. If you're reading this note, then you've met Marcosito. His father, Marcos, was killed in a super mutant attack on our settlement, and I'm afraid my own wounds will be taking me as well. I don't have much time, and I'm terrified to send him out into this world alone. But I don't have any choice. I'm begging you to please take him in and see that he gets the food and shelter he'll need in order to survive. Tell our little Cito that his parents love him, and that if he's looking for us, we'll always be inside his heart. Cito's mother, Imelda. So 20-some-odd years ago, Cito's parents, who were simple settlers, got attacked by super mutants. His father died in the attack and his mother was mortally wounded. After they died, Cito wandered off into the wasteland alone, with no possessions aside from this note that his mother left him. Somehow, he found his way to Nuka World and wandered into the safari adventure, whereupon these gorillas found baby Cito and raised him as their own.
Huh. So it seems like the Gatorclaws, or the monsters, are coming from an animal cloning facility somewhere beneath Safari Adventure.
Shiny thing, help, new friend.
Do you know anything about a cloning facility around here?
New friend say strange words. Cito not know what new friend want, but Cito know more about wrinkly man.
Unless this shiny thing is about to sprout wings and lead me to the cloning facility, we're out of luck.
New friend funny. Shiny thing not bird. No worry. Cito can help. Cito remember something.
This holotape is worthless. Doesn't point me to the cloning facility.
Cito remember something.
Yes, it was very helpful. I just need to find the cloning facility.
Cito have idea. Cito see wrinkly man come from big triangle house long time ago. Go to big triangle house. Find cloning facility. Stop monsters. Cito come with new friend. Cito help.
If you don't mind being gator bait, sure, tag along.
Cito not bait. Cito hook.
Okay, I could use the help. Follow me.
Cito strong. Cito help new friend.
No, stay with your family. I've got this.
Cito stay. Cito protect family.
Can you get your family to help us?
Chris big and strong. Chris help new friend and Cito.
If we pass this speech check, a new gorilla named Chris appears and joins us while we explore the safari adventure. But Chris is a complete waste. You'll know what I mean as we get into fights. This gorilla doesn't help at all, so he's really not worth your time. Plus, having him around actually makes the encounter more difficult for you if you decide to turn on Cito later. Also note that these guys are called ghoul-rillas, not gorillas, but ghoul-rillas. Their faces are mutated and bubbling up with boils. They're probably unique to the wasteland, having mutated and evolved here on the Safari Adventure over the span of 200 years. Well, our mission is clear. Cito told us that he saw the old wrinkly man, Mr. McDermot, come out of the nearby Triangle House. The Triangle House is really close, and it's called the Visitors Center.
Big triangle house. It have doors Cito never open.
Upon entry, we see a Gatorclaw on the bottom floor. Thankfully, we have time up on this balcony to shoot at him before he closes distance. We can then finish him off with melee. As we walk to the northwest corner of the room, Cito stops us.
This door Cito not know how to open.
Our answers to these Gatorclaws must be behind this door. Activating the employee terminal, the first thing we see is a ransom note. The note was written to none other than Bradburton himself. We learned that before the war, a radical group called A.F.A.D. kidnapped a scientist working here named Dr. Hein. They only resorted to kidnapping this doctor after Nuka World repeatedly ignored their requests, ultimately banning them from the park. Ironically, they justify this kidnapping by saying that they live in a free country, apparently unaware that businesses have the right to ban people from private property, and that by kidnapping people, they're actually encroaching on other people's freedom. I guess freedom is only important to them when it's their own freedom or the freedom of those they're concerned with. They tell Brad Burton that they have taken Dr. Hein to the angry anaconda. They warn Brad Burton by saying, "Come alone, and we will discuss the terms of his release, but if you bring the police, you will lose your star employee." With this, they have not only kidnapped Dr. Hein, but they have threatened his life. The next entry, Facility Security Levels, tells us the code names that designate all of the different security levels. Code Chinchilla stands for normal operations, no security measures are in effect. Code Orangutan means light security protocols have been initiated. Code Dingo means medium security protocols have been initiated. And Code Grizzly means full security lockdown has been initiated. We see at the very top of this terminal that the security status is Code Grizzly. Could this have been automatically triggered when the bombs dropped? The final terminal entry again tells us that the lab status is set to Code Grizzly. The facility is in full security lockdown. The only ones who can access this door are Dr. Hein, Dr. McDermot, or Mr. Bradburton. Well, we have no idea where Mr. Bradburton is. We've already learned that Dr. McDermott is dead and did not have the key, which means that the only one who can get us through this door is Dr. Hein. But we just read from the terminal that A.F.A.D kidnapped Dr. Hein. Now we've got to locate this man. Turning around, we can tell Cito what we've learned.
It seems like Dr. Hein was kidnapped and taken somewhere called the Angry Anaconda. We find that, and we can find his passcode to get into the cloning facility.
Sound like name of snake from old zoo. Oh, maybe Doctor under giant metal snake.
Giant metal snake? That doesn't make much sense.
No friend, not worry. Cito no.
The, giant metal snake. Of course.
New friend funny. How not see giant metal snake?
You're talking nonsense. Snakes aren't made of metal.
Not real snake. New friend listen to Cito. Maybe learn something.
I'm sure you know exactly where that is, Cito.
Yes. Cito know. It big. What word? Ride. Ride like big snake. Cito see from everywhere. Very big. Very snaky. It uphill behind Sue. Maybe Dr. Man there.
How did you know an anaconda was a kind of snake, Cito?
Cito try learn words from Sue. Lots of words in Sue. Words and pictures. Cito see anaconda in house with snakes. Pictures in house with snakes look like big metal snake on hill. Cito smart.
Right. The giant roller coaster. I get it now.
Roller coaster. New friend say strange words.
This had better not be a wild goose chase, Cito.
Not goose. Snake. New friend talk good, but not listen good. Hope new friend find Dr. Man.
Good job, Cito. I knew you'd be helpful.
Cito help. Cito like help new friend.
On the ground near this door is a human skeleton and a duffel bag. Inside the duffel bag, we find the A.F.A.D manifesto. This skeleton must be the remains of one of the radical A.F.A.D members. The manifesto is a holotape which we can play in our Pip-Boy.
We, the members of A.F.A.D, have an important message for those...
Psst. Chipmunk, tell them what our name means.
What are you doing? I have the thing running right now.
Don't just say A.F.A.D. Tell them what it stands for.
I'm trying to do something serious here, Rabbits, and I already have the recording started.
We'll take this out of the recording later. Just tell them.
Fine. We, the members of the Animal Friends and Defenders, have an important message to those who are causing the destruction of the environment. We will not stand idly by and watch our animal brothers and sisters get hunted to extinction. We will take action. We will not remain complacent while corporations abuse our animal brothers and sisters in the name of so-called science. We will take action. We will not turn our backs as...
Oh, don't forget the part about slaughtering the animals needlessly for food.
You know I'm recording, right? You see that red light, yeah?
I'm sorry, Chipmunk. I was just trying to, you know...
Just toss that tape and we'll try again. And when we're done, don't throw out the good tape and keep the bad one like last time.
And just the kind of sophistication we would expect from a bunch of self-important radicals. We learned that A.F.A.D stands for Animal Friends and Defenders. These guys were upset with Nuka World for experimenting on animals and, as they said, causing destruction of the environment. They described animals as brothers and sisters. Sounds like the demands that they had tried to quote-unquote peacefully make before they decided to kidnap Dr. Hein was nothing short of demanding that they cease all experiments altogether, which of course is something that Brad Burton and Nuka World would never do. Inside the visitor center, we find a bunch of human remains. These are likely the remains of park visitors who died to the nuclear fallout. Behind the visitor center desk, we find a Nuka grape and the Nuka Rush recipe, one of the many rare Nuka-Cola recipe books that we can collect in Nuka World. Right next to this recipe is the Welcome Center terminal. Here we find 4 memos, all written the same year, 2077. The first one comes from May, where we learn that during a school field trip, one of the big cats escaped from the big cats area, resulting in, quote, an unfortunate accident. Due to this accident, they're changing their policy, requiring that all school groups be accompanied by a minimum of 1 adult chaperone per 6 children. Also, they require that all guests fill out a full death and dismemberment liability waiver. Oh, but this is tragic. We can deduce from this that a child must have been dismembered and devoured by one of the big cats. Looks like after signing the death and dismemberment liability waiver, parents send their children to Nuka World at their own risk. In the next one, we learn that A.F.A.D, the Animal Friends and Defenders group, was becoming an increasing nuisance to the security team here at Nuka World. And we learn a little bit about how A.F.A.D acted. They ran around wearing animal masks, they wore various animal tattoos, and on occasion came to the park in full animal suits. Oh. They encourage employees not to approach these individuals, but to instead alert security or activate the nearest Protectron pod. Now, we know how violent these Protectron pods can be. I guess this would have led to their immediate death. And that Nuka World was okay with instructing their employees to straight up kill these A.F.A.D members. In the next entry, we learn a little bit more about Project Cobalt. This was an intramail from John Caleb Brad Burton himself. He says that if employees find any deliveries marked Project Cobalt, they should forward the deliveries to the Secure Beverageer Laboratory at the Nuka World bottling plant. This entry tells us that the laboratory is there, if we didn't discover it already, but I covered that laboratory and the entire Project Cobalt experiment in a previous video. If interested, you can watch that video here. The final entry on October 23rd, 2077 is in reference to the kidnapping of Dr. Hein, and we learned that I was actually mistaken. Code Grizzly was not automatically initiated due to the bombs dropping, but the staff initiated Code Grizzly in direct response to A.F.A.D kidnapping Dr. Hein. We learned from the ransom note that A.F.A.D took Dr. Hein to the Angry Anaconda, and in this terminal, we learned that the staff placed the Angry Anaconda construction site off limits. They said in this entry to employees that it's off limits because the superstructure has been determined to be dangerously unstable, but we know that it's because that's where A.F.A.D brought Dr. Hein. As we prepare to leave, we find pre-war skeletons that paint a tragic tale. A man's body lies over a railing, a woman lies on the ground next to him, and what was presumably their baby in a baby carriage lies tipped over next to her. Rounding the corner, we find a big gorilla. This depicts the ancestor of the ghoul-rillas that we met previously. And underneath this big guy, we see a Jangles the Moon Monkey and a Nuka-Cola Orange. So we need to find the angry anaconda. Cito tells us that this is a big metal snake, which of course we realize is a roller coaster. So we're looking for a roller coaster. But to find the roller coaster, we'll need to explore the whole of the safari adventure. As we walk around exploring, we still hear announcements over the park's PA system. Some of these are dull, others are humorous, and others shed light on a pre-war American culture that is frightening to think about.
Due to a mix-up at Safari Adventure's animal waste facility, apple juice will not be served this evening at the 4-Leaf Fried Fish restaurant. Nuka World is pleased to announce that a small portion of your admission fee will be donated to support our men and women fighting overseas. Just a reminder that Nuka World is not responsible for injuries sustained by the audience during the Cola Clowns Comedy Cavalcade. Reserve your tickets now and be the first to ride our Angry Anaconda coaster opening soon at Safari Adventure. Guide maps for our hedge maze are available for confused visitors at the Safari Adventure Park office for only $35. We're happy to announce that the first 10 guests to arrive at the Barry the Bear show will receive a plush berry to take home. While touring the Gorilla House, please refrain from making rude gestures to any of our primate specimens. Thank you. Attention guests. In case of emergency, anti-venom is available at the exit for the Reptile House.
Heading down a pathway towards the restrooms, I saw the shadow of a Gatorclaw. I thought earlier that maybe I performed so poorly against these Gatorclaws simply because I didn't get my stealth bonus. Well, now I had a perfect opportunity to successfully land a stealth attack. This was a great relief to me. At this point in the recording, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to complete this video for you, if I couldn't even kill these Gatorclaws. But at least now I know how to go about it. As long as I land that sneak critical, I'll be okay. Behind the primate house, we find a skeleton next to an advanced locked safe. Unlocking the safe grants us some randomly generated loot. Going all the way around the primate house, we get attacked by bloodworms. And it's here where we find a grave. This startled me at first because it was the last thing that I expected. Whose grave is this? We find 3 cinder blocks stacked as an impromptu headstone with a Nuka World flagpole embedded in it. Resting on the cinder blocks are a pair of glasses, and it's then that I remembered that Cito told us that he personally buried the old wrinkly man, Dr. McDermot. This must be the grave of Dr. McDermot. We next come upon a theater where they used to put on animal shows for kids. Here we see a Gatorclaw fighting a Brahmaluf. I initially thought I was going to get lucky and be able to sneak up on this thing, but no, the Gatorclaw decimated the Brahmaluf, rendering it to pieces. Cito managed to distract the thing, allowing me to sneak up behind him, and after a bit of work and pulling out my pistol to finish him off, we finally put the Gatorclaw down. Going back to the theater, we can take a look at the carnage. This Gatorclaw just tossed the body parts of the Brahmaluf all over the place. Now, there's really nothing interesting here at the theater, but going around behind it, we find a shack. But there's no door to this shack, and we can't climb up on top of it to get to the other side. Well, if playing games all my life has taught me anything, it's that there's bound to be some sort of valuable secret in this shed, so we need to find another way to access this shack. Nearby, we find a little shop area where tourists could have purchased toys and mementos. Near to this, we find a still functioning consumer animatronic. We can take the outfit off of this guy, which is an easy way to get some of the unique Nuka World costumes. Now we have two paths ahead of us. We can continue along the pathway near this theater, or we can go up some steps to an upper portion of the safari adventure. Let's explore the upper portion first. Here we find a Gatorclaw, and I was not able to surprise him. I managed to lure him down to that souvenir shop area, and I just ran around the thing, shooting at him with my pistol until he died. The gorilla Chris was absolutely no help. Cito did his job admirably, but Chris just would not attack. After the Gatorclaw was dead, I even looked around for Chris and I couldn't find him anywhere. I probably spent 5 minutes trying to find this doggone gorilla until Chris finally emerged from the bushes on his own. I still don't know where he ran off to. Heading back up the steps, we can continue on our way, and it's here where we discover Cappy's treehouse. This is a treehouse standing tall right smack dab in the middle of the park. But to get to the tree, we have to enter a maze. As we explore this maze, we hear Gatorclaws growling nearby. I kept on expecting this Gatorclaw to jump up and attack me around every corner, but this Gatorclaw was nowhere to be seen. Instead, I came upon a whole bunch of rad rats. Now, if we are wearing our Cappy glasses that we got from Sierra Petrovita, on a brick wall at the end of one of these dead ends, we find the E hidden Cappy. We can then activate it to record our clue.
That's one.
We need to find all of these as part of the scavenger hunt that Sierra Petrovita sends us on. But we'll talk about the rewards of completing that quest in another video. Soon after finding this hidden Cappy, the sun came out and the rain stopped. I retraced my steps to go down another path. I could see the tree getting closer as I wound my way through this maze. At last, I rounded a bend to find another Gatorclaw. This was much tougher than some of the previous fights. After some nerd rage, chems, and a whole lot of stim packs, Cito and I managed to finally kill this blasted thing. But again, Chris was absolutely no help. After the Gatorclaw dies, of course, Chris walks up behind Cito. Thanks for the help, buddy. This Gatorclaw was guarding the entrance to the tree. We can go through an arch where we find an elevator that leads us to the top. Taking the elevator up, we get a wonderful bird's eye view of the park. This treehouse is split into 2 floors. On the first floor, we find the remains of a service member lying on a bench. Next to him is a park medallion dispenser. We need to activate each of these in each of the parks to complete the quest that Nira sent us on. But I'll save the completion of that quest for a video another day. Heading upstairs, we find a lot of containers to loot, and behind the counter we find a Nuka Cola Victory, as well as a big roll of Nuka-Cade tickets. Here we find another consumer animatronic with a unique Nuka World outfit and more U.S. military servicemen corpses, one by an ammo crate and one on top of an end-of-dungeon steamer trunk. I find it really interesting that after the bombs dropped, after martial law had been declared, that the United States military sent their servicemen here to Nuka World, and that they came to the top of Cappy's treehouse. Now, it's doubtful that they were fighting the Chinese up here, but what may have happened is after the bombs dropped, looting and raiding became widespread, and the service members deployed to keep domestic peace got cornered and trapped up here by raiders and looters. Here they either died to gunfire from below or finally succumbed to radiation. This treehouse has a wonderful vantage point of the entire safari adventure. We see a couple of buildings that we have not explored yet, but we're interested in finding the angry anaconda. Looking out northwest, we finally see it off in the distance. There's one gap in the big brick wall that surrounds Safari Adventure, so that is our destination. Looks like going down this big maze was a mistake. We should have gone down the pathway near to that theater. That would have taken us by that diner with the boat on top of it towards the gap in the wall. With this knowledge in hand, we can go back down the elevator, retrace our steps through the maze, head back towards that pathway past the theater where we emerge next to the diner with a boat on top. Here we find a Gatorclaw standing right up next to that maze we just explored. It was was his growling voice that we kept hearing around every corner, which made me paranoid at every turn. Cito and I, as usual, kill this guy, and then Chris decides to join us after the Gatorclaw is dead. Of course. Heading west from this point, we find a few ant mounds. We can kill the ants here, and after they're dead, we find that shack that we previously saw behind the theater. But this part of the shack actually has a door, so we can finally enter it. Inside the shack, we find the Nuka Hearty recipe, which allows us to mix the Nuka Hearty Cola at any mixing station. Heading up the steps to the diner, we find some rats inside. Here we find a cooking station. Let's put a pin in this. We may need to come back here later, but we can also use it now to cook up all of that Gatorclaw meat that we've collected. The Gatorclaw steaks are pretty amazing, granting us 1 extra agility for an entire hour. We can also cook up some of that Rad Rat meat we've collected so far. A Rad Rat steak gives us plus 5 action points for 20 minutes. Both of these buffs are going to be pretty useful at such a low level, so I went ahead and consumed 1 of each. Right next to this diner is the Reptile house. This is where Cito told us that he saw pictures of anacondas. We do see big snake statues out front, but these are cobras with big Nuka-Cola bottles stuffed in their mouths. Heading inside, we find a very small room with nothing of note. There are some plaques against the wall next to some tanks which previously held reptiles, but there's nothing there now. We can open a door to enter the main room where we find a big alligator pool gated off with a huge gate. And of course, here we find a Gatorclaw. Cito and I managed to kill this guy. I stayed alive by running around and around in circles through the gaps in this gate. And of course, Chris didn't help at all. After the Gatorclaw was dead, Chris decided to run up and say hello. Hello, Chris. Having a good vacation? I hope so. Going down the nearby stairs, we find some rad rats to get some rad rat meat for that wonderful rad rat steak, and we find more pre-war human carnage, 2 more bodies, and another baby stroller. So many families destroyed by the apocalypse. Near one of the display cases, we find a Nuka-Cola orange, and we find a wall-mounted terminal. Here we learn some of the emergency procedures that the Reptile House had here, and we learn just how excessively bureaucratic Brad Burton's Nuka World was. If a park visitor gets bitten by a poisonous reptile, instead of immediately getting medical help, which any sane human being would do, Nuka World staff was to follow the following guidelines. First, confirm that the visitor has a valid park admission ticket, with the liability release printed on the back. If the visitor has a valid ticket, the bitten visitor must then fill out a Safari Adventure incident report. To get one, the visitor has to go all the way back to Nuka Town, USA, and grab one from the main office. Remember, all the time, this poor person is poisoned. If the visitor is paralyzed and unable to move, staff can inform them that Nuka World emergency stretchers can be dispatched for $400. They make the victim pay for his own emergency stretcher. Only once the Safari Adventure incident report has been completed will staff finally administer first aid. But of course, the cost of materials and the paramedics' fees will be billed to the visitor. But worst of all, if the visitor does not have a valid park admission, maybe by dropping it, losing it, flushing it, instead of helping that person, staff is instructed to immediately call security. There are then 3 reminders on this terminal. The first one tells us that the park used to have a death adder, a black mamba, and an inland taipan snake as part of the little kids' reptile petting zone. They only had to remove these highly dangerous snakes after recent incidents. This tells us that kids were likely bitten by poisonous snakes. The memo ends by saying, in the future, employees are strongly encouraged to read the warnings on our enclosures before transferring specimens. But is that really necessary? You work in the reptile section of Safari Adventure. You're preparing poisonous animals for the little kids' reptile petting zone. Do you not know that some of these may be venomous? How thick can these employees be? In the next entry, we learned that some of the guides were telling visitors that snake eggs could make, quote, a heck of a delicious omelet. The memo ends by saying, "This fact is wildly incorrect," which I guess would make it not a fact, wouldn't it? And in the last one, we learn more about A.F.A.D. Due to the recent security issues involving the group called A.F.A.D, do not allow visitors to hold a specimen that's been removed from its enclosure for reptile touch time. Instead, guides must hold the specimen during the entire experience, and visitors are only allowed to touch them, not hold them. We learn that A.F.A.D has used these opportunities to steal the reptiles. This memo ends by saying we've already lost 3 very expensive reptiles to this misguided animal rights group. Sounds like A.F.A.D has waged full-scale war against Nuka World. Heading out of the reptile house, we can walk down into the nearby creek and up a hill between some rocks to exit the park and head towards the angry anaconda. As we get close, Cito tells us that we're headed the right way.
This it? This big metal snake.
The problem is that as we get close, we see no fewer than 3 Gatorclaws, all crowded together right where we're supposed to go. I had the misfortune of catching the attention of all 3 at the same time. I had to use the geography cleverly to kill some of these guys, and I did a whole lot of running. But at last, all 3 Gatorclaws were dead. No thanks to Chris, who meandered over a nearby hill only after all 3 of them were dead. We find ourselves in a construction zone, and the Gatorclaws have been tearing the wandering Brahmalifts to pieces. We find their body parts scattered all over. In the middle of the angry anaconda construction site, we find a trailer next to a fusion generator. We can loot the fusion core from the generator, and we find some skeletons lying on the ground near to the doors to the trailer, but these doors are locked. To find the key, we head up a ramp and across a walkway to the roof of the trailer. Here we find the skeleton of a woman, and in a duffel bag near her corpse, we find the A.F.A.D key and the A.F.A.D interrogation holotape.
Please, I don't know what you people want from me.
Stop playing innocent, Dr. Hine. We know what's going on in that laboratory of yours.
Yeah, Hein. We know what's going on down there.
Are you going to shut up and let me do this, Rabbit?
Sorry, Mike. I just want to scare the guy.
For God's sakes, Rabbit, you're supposed to use our code names.
Both of you shut up. Now look, Dr. Hine. We know Brad Burton has you performing cloning experiments on the animals you locked up in that torture chamber you call a lab.
I can assure you, we treat all of our specimens with the utmost respect. There's really no reason to keep me here against my will.
Oh, that's where you're wrong, Dr. Hine. We brought you to the Angry Anaconda construction site for a very specific reason. As a supposed man of science, how can you be so stupid to allow Brad Burton to build this thing so close to where you're keeping the animals? Do you have any idea the lasting damage it'll do to them? Well, do you?
Look, why don't you just untie me and then let me head back to the laboratory? I'll talk to Mr. Brad Burton, and I'm sure we can all have this misunderstanding cleared up in no time.
Ah, yeah, nice try, Hein. But you aren't going anywhere.
Hey, Mike, Ingrid, something's going on outside.
What is it, Rabbit?
I don't know. People running around everywhere. Maybe looking for us. Maybe not. Looks pretty crazy.
All right. Rabbit, stay with Dr. Hine. Robin, let's walk the perimeter of the place with Mouse and see what the hell is going on.
That commotion they saw going on outside was the end of the world. The skeleton we find on the roof of this trailer is likely that of Robin. The skeletons we find near the doorways are likely those of Chipmunk, Rabbit, and Mouse. Well, if so, if the apocalypse happened right as this holotape finished recording, then we should find the corpse of Dr. Hine inside the trailer, and along with him, the key to the cloning facility. Using the A.F.A.D key that we found in the duffel bag, we can open one of the sliding doors. Inside, at the very end, sure enough, we find the corpse of Dr. Hine. The A.F.A.D members had confiscated his personal belongings before interrogating him and placed them in a nearby tool case. Here we find Dr. Hine's passcode.
Dr. Man have key. we open cloning facility.
And as Cito says, we can now open the door to the cloning facility. Heading all the way back to the big triangle house, which is the welcome center, we can go back to that door and access the terminal. With the key in hand, we can choose the option to unlock the door to the Nuka Replication facility. Once the door is unlocked, we enter through a darkened hallway, and Cito expresses his awe.
Cito never been here.
Neither Cito nor we know what to expect. At the end of the hallway, we find ourselves in a big atrium area, which is being patrolled by a Gatorclaw. Nerd rage again got us through the fight, and after the Deathclaw is dead, Chris decides to come through the door. Hey, Chris! Now, we have a couple of ways to go forward. We'll start by opening the big double doors against the southern wall. To the right, we find an empty cage, but to the left, we find Dr. Hind's terminal. And on the table next to the terminal are two of Dr. McDermot's journal entries. We find 53L and 47B. Let's listen to the earlier one first, 47B.
This is Dr. Darren McDermott, last known survivor at the Safari Adventure Replication Facility, continuing my personal recordings. It's been, hell, I don't know how long it's been. I think I stopped counting months ago. Or was it years? Even with the scientific equipment at my disposal, it's clear there's no going back from what I've become. The radiation from the bombs has taken its toll on my body, twisting and deforming my physical appearance. But instead of falling into despair, I've embraced the change and used it as a basis for my new cloning research. Perhaps this curse will turn out to be a blessing. I just wish Dr. Hind was here to guide my hand. I feel lost without him.
And next, we can listen to 53L.
This is Dr. Darren McDermott, last known survivor at the Safari Adventure Replication Facility, continuing my personal recordings. I've been continuing to modify the Nuka replicator to provide a source of food. It's ironic that the very same device Nuka World was using to create its animal specimens for leisure has become integral to my survival. Using a tissue sample from a cow, I was able to replicate a viable clone, consume it as food, then use the remaining tissue to create another. I figure as long as the Nuka replicator continues to function, I'll have an endless supply of food for years to come. Dr. Hind would be proud of my accomplishment. It's sad. It's been so long I've almost forgotten what he looked like. My God, it's been decades now. Maybe even a century or more, hasn't it? Has it been so long? I'll continue recording later.
These holotapes were placed on Dr. Hind's terminal. Dr. Hind was the skeleton we found in the trailer, and we can learn a little bit about the man whom Dr. McDermott admired so much. There are 5 journal entries here, all from 2077, with the latest at the top and the earliest at the bottom. Let's read the one that Dr. Hind wrote the day he was kidnapped, on October 23rd, 2077. We learned that he got kidnapped by A.F.A.D due to his own stupidity. He got a phone call at 1 in the morning telling him that he was needed at the Angry Anaconda construction site to assist with some escaped animal that's been injured. But maybe he's not as stupid as we at first think, because we learned that this has happened before. It happened with an escaped buffalo that got a broken leg, and another time, an escaped animal died when security used the wrong dosage for a tranquilizer dart. I guess he had reason to feel like he had to go there and take care of it himself. But of course, this wasn't a real emergency. This was A.F.A.D trying to lure him out to kidnap him. In the next entry, we learn that Dr. Hind was frustrated about Project Cobalt. He's been working on this replicator with Dr. McDermott. He's making great progress, but he needs more money to get things done. He keeps on asking for a budget increase, but he keeps getting denied because more of the Nuka-Cola funds are being diverted to Project Cobalt. He says that the facility needs the money because Safari Adventure is the home to hundreds of living, breathing organisms that all have their own unique food food, water, and environmental requirements. He keeps on asking exactly what this Project Cobalt thing is about, but he complains that he's continually met with denials. They just won't tell him what's going on. He ends by saying for all the trouble it's worth, this project better produce something big. In the next one, we learn a little bit more about the Replicator. Remember, A.F.A.D accused him of cloning animals in an inhumane way. We learned that both Dr. Hine and Dr. McDermot were experimenting on polar bears. But one of the problems they were struggling with was that polar bears kept coming out of the Nuka Gen Replicator inside out and then exploding. He says, I assume this was due to an incorrect sequence, but I've never seen such a violent reaction from a specimen before. He confesses that it was actually a rather spectacular result, strictly from a scientific point of view. Yeah, I'd call an inside-out polar bear that explodes pretty spectacular, but here we learn that maybe A.F.A.D actually had a point. How many organisms were they using the Replicator to produce who entered the world in agony only to explode in agony? It seems a bit inhumane to me. In the next entry, Dr. Hine defends himself and his work from criticism that he got from A.F.A.D. He says those A.F.A.D idiots are at it again. They vandalized his Corvega by filling it with manure, and then despite being assured by security that it would never happen again, he arrived to work today to find the words, "Stop the torture," printed across the security door. He ends by saying, I don't know why these morons think we're torturing animals. Anything that we need to dispose of in the laboratory is dealt with in a swift and rather humane manner. Maybe so. Maybe this is just the price of science and of progress. But I don't know, if inside-out polar bears exploding is the norm here, I'm not sure how he can suggest that he's not torturing these animals. It doesn't sound like a humane way to treat animals to me. The final entry is actually the first one chronologically. It was made on New Year's Eve. He says, I think I drank a little too much last night when ringing in the new year. Woke up right next to the Nuka Gen Replicator's main terminal, and a program was running. It looks like I was trying to sequence an anteater with 16 giraffe-type legs, scales, 4 eyes, and 2 tails. Amusingly, he says, even in my inebriated state, I've created a fairly viable specimen sequence that could possibly work. I don't think the animal would live very long, he says, but my scientific curiosity says that I should give it a try. I'll have to consult Dr. McDermot. Well, ethical arguments aside, it sounds like this Nuka Gen Replicator is a marvel of technology. Based on these descriptions, it sounds like you can pretty much produce any kind of animal that you can imagine. If this Dr. Hine could imagine an anteater with 16 giraffe legs, lizard scales, 4 eyes, and 2 tails, well, then you could pretty much print any kind of living organism you wanted. That's really amazing. When done, we can loot this small room for chems, and then head on over to the eastern wall to read Dr. McDermot's terminal. Inside, we find 5 journal entries just like Dr. Hine, but the date is out of range. This tells us that these entries were likely written long after the bombs dropped. And here we find evidence that Dr. McDermot was correct when he told Cito that he was responsible for producing the monsters. He says, my attempts at creating the Gatorclaw continue. And here's where we learn what the Gatorclaw is made of. He used samples from a Jackson chameleon, just like a Deathclaw, and an American alligator. He complains, however, that he's having a hard time getting sample Q334 stable. His ultimate goal in creating the Gatorclaw is to produce a guardian creature for the safari adventure. He used the Jackson chameleon and the American alligator to produce the ferocity and the brawn of the creature, but the creature's not going to work as a good guardian unless it can take orders from Dr. McDermot. He was hoping that he could use brain cells from sample Q334, but he keeps getting failure after failure. He's really hesitant to just turn this thing on and start churning out Gatorclaws until he knows that he can control it. The last thing he wants to do is attract unwanted attention to the park. In the next entry, we learn that while foraging for food and supplies today, Dr. McDermot stumbled upon a super mutant. It had recently been killed. It had a bullet wound, but he had never seen a super mutant before, so he dragged it back to his laboratory and began an extensive examination. His conclusion is accurate. He concluded that the super mutant originally was human, that the mutant was a genetic mutation of a human, and it was from the super mutant that he got the sample Q334. This is the very same sample that he was trying to infuse with the Gatorclaw. It was this sample that he thought would make the Gatorclaw intelligent. We must remember that Dr. McDermot has no knowledge of FEV. As far as he knows, this was a natural mutation, not a forced one. He doesn't understand just how dangerous sample Q334 truly is. In the next entry, we learn why Dr. McDermot keeps on working with the Nuka replicator. He says that he realizes this machine could possibly be the last of its kind on Earth, meaning that the use of this machine could be mankind's only hope for repopulating the Earth with animals and returning the ecosystem to normal. One of the park's power generators failed, leaving only one left intact, and this worries him because he doesn't want to have to destroy the replicator. He sees this mission of keeping the replicator functional as a mission to save life on Earth. In the next entry, we learn that Dr. McDermot turned into a ghoul, which is something we likely already knew if he lived long enough to meet Cito before he died. He is also incredibly lonely. He doesn't know how much time has passed since the bombs dropped. He's starting to talk with himself a lot. His loneliness and his isolation is making it hard for him to even continue his work. He's considered just ending it all, but then he asks himself, who would protect this laboratory from those who would seek to misuse its gifts? In the end, he concludes that he has no choice. He must keep himself alive to protect the replicator and to preserve animal life on this planet. In the final entry, he talks more about his transformation into a ghoul, and we learn a little bit about what it feels like to turn into a ghoul. Now, we get the impression that ghouls are rotting from the inside out, and maybe feral ghouls are, but sentient, peaceful ghouls like Dr. McDermot, ghouls that can continue to perform advanced, complicated scientific experiments, aren't really rotting away. Something else is happening inside of them. He says, instead of my organs shutting down and my life being slowly drained away, my body is fighting back. His skin isn't melting and rotting away. He says, my skin has thickened and become heavily wrinkled as if it's attempting to resist the radiation rather than allow it to penetrate my body. He ends by saying, I'm just happy to be alive. This could potentially give us some really interesting insight into the mechanics of ghouls. Are they really rotting from the inside out, or is something else happening to them that simply gives them the appearance of rotting like feral ghouls? Maybe they're not really rotting. After finishing with this terminal, we can go up some stairs. Here we find a wall-mounted terminal which allows us to unlock a security-locked door. This room was a cold storage room of sorts. We find a whole bunch of refrigerators. Not a whole lot in here except for some blood packs. And with this atrium area fully explored, we can go through the double doors against the southern wall to continue further into the facility. Going down the stairs, we see that this section is flooded in about a foot of water. We hear Gatorclaws growling from somewhere. On the ground near to a staircase, we find a Gatorclaw nest. And just then, a Gatorclaw emerges to the north. Cito and Chris immediately go to attack, but it's then that another Gatorclaw comes down the stairs. After a fierce fight with many broken limbs and a whole lot of nerd rage and chems, we managed to kill these two Gatorclaws, one of which was an albino Gatorclaw. Heading up the stairs, we find an assortment of chems and containers and a big red end of dungeon steamer trunk. There's a whole lot of mentats here, which I believe tells us that both Dr. McDermot and Dr. Hine used mentats to keep themselves competitive live while working here at Nuka World. Mentats must have been the sports steroids of academics in this pre-war world. To the southwest, we find a big roll of Nuka-Cade tickets on a shelf and another fusion core in a fusion generator. Heading to the north, we find another end of dungeon steamer trunk. This one is green, with a whole bunch of ammunition inside. On a shelf nearby, we find a Nuka-Cola Quantum and a Nuka-Cola lunchbox, and even more chems. And at last, against the western wall, we find the Nuka Gen Replicator. Resting on the console, we find Dr. McDermot's final journal entry, number 69H.
This is Dr. Darren McDermott, last known survivor at the Safari Adventure Replication Facility, continuing my personal recordings. I ventured outside today and almost got spotted by a group of wasteland scavengers that had wandered into Safari Adventure. Therefore, against my own better judgment, I'm going to attempt to splice a few of the more dangerous samples I have left in cold storage. I need to use the Nuka Gen Replicator to create some sort of specimen that's formidable, yet trainable. Something that can protect me, but most importantly, protect this facility. It will take some time to work out the chemistry and mathematics of the data, but I'm confident I can create a viable specimen within a few years. I know Dr. Hine would have objected to this course of action, but he isn't here, and I can't let this equipment fall into the wrong hands.
He says that he knows that Dr. Hine would disapprove, but Dr. Hine's the guy that spliced an anteater with a bunch of giraffe legs. So I'm pretty sure Dr. Hine would have been cool with it. When we access the terminal, we find two options. We can disable the current replication procedure, or we can read some of the program history. Reading the program history, we see 3 entries from Dr. McDermott. Here we can read about the many failures Dr. McDermott suffered along the way during the production of his Gatorclaw. In this early testing, McDermott notes that even though the Gatorclaw subject survived the incubation period, the specimen ended up being highly volatile and aggressive. He was unable to get the specimen to recognize his commands. At the very end, he says that this may be because he was using sample Q334. We remember that sample Q334 came from supermutants. We can infer that the influence of FEV is wreaking havoc inside the genetics of the Gatorclaw. In the next entry, we see another failure. The specimen failed to survive the incubation period due to cellular breakdown, which occurred within 1 hour of sequencing. It all comes down to sample Q334. In order to make the Gatorclaw viable, Dr. McDermott needs to continually adjust the formula mixture using sample Q334. In the final entry, we see that Dr. McDermott still has yet to find success. The subject survived incubation, but exhibited extreme levels of ionizing radiation. This contaminated subject makes it too dangerous for command recognition patterns. He again had to adjust his mixture of sample Q334 in hopes of getting a better result. But that's where the terminal entries end. We don't know if he was ever satisfied with the result that he got. But we've met these Gatorclaws. We know that they're definitely a viable specimen, but almost certainly impossible to command. Now from here, we can choose to disable the current replication procedure. This completes the objective. And I suppose we can presume that McDermott couldn't disable this himself because he got chased out of the replicator facility by the Gatorclaws that somehow escaped and made a home here. He couldn't get back in without being killed, and so he retreated to the primate house where he talked to Cito before dying, possibly due to wounds he received from the Gatorclaws while fleeing. Now, if we want, at any time, we can resume the queued replication procedure, which gives us even more Gatorclaws to kill. This is a great way to continually have access to all of that lovely Gatorclaw meat. But for right now, the quest updates instructing us to clear the remaining Gatorclaws from the Safari Zone. Because after all, we can't convince a raider faction to move in if there are a bunch of dangerous Gatorclaws still wandering about. As we move away from the terminal, 2 Gatorclaws appear from a nearby chamber and attack.
Cito do good.
After these are destroyed, and after Chris returns from his hasty retreat, we leave by going through a big pipe against the eastern wall. First, we need to access a terminal located on a pillar next to this pipe. From here, we can unlock a door inside the pipe. Going into the pipe, we can go all the way to the end and exit through the door. This brings us to the small creek that winds through the safari adventure. We now have to kill all of the remaining Gatorclaws in the safari adventure. The number of Gatorclaws we'll have to kill will vary depending upon how many you left alive while exploring the place previously. In my game, I only had 3 left. I tracked one down near to some cages along the western wall. Inside one of the cages, we find a dead pack raider. Looks like this poor guy wandered into the safari adventure only to get destroyed by one of these Gatorclaws. After killing this guy, I found the second to last one sitting inside a pool inside a big gated off area. Once he was dead, there was only one left to kill. We find this guy inside the bear enclosure. As we get close, we see a big sign, warning, do not feed the animals. Nearby is one of our favorite sandwich boards in the game, the do not feed the bears sign. Crouching down and sneaking on in, we see a cave against the northern wall, but as we get close looking to the left, we see a sleeping Yaogwai. Since he's sleeping, we can successfully execute a sneak attack, and once he's dead, we can creep on into the cave. Inside the cave, we find a Gatorclaw in the middle of a fight with a stunted Yaogwai. We can take advantage of the situation to attack one of the 2 opponents. I chose to attack the Gatorclaw since he's clearly the toughest one. With the Yaogwai's help, we quickly killed the Gatorclaw, and then we could turn our attention to the Yaogwai. Once dead, our quest log updates telling us to deal with Cito and his family. Deal with them? How do we do that? Well, we have a number of options. To deal with him and his family, I went all the way back to the primate house. On the way out of this cave, we find a maintenance tunnel, where we also find a maintenance terminal. Here we find more evidence as to how secretive Brad Burton and Nuka were being about Project Cobalt. Here we find entries from the maintenance guy, B. Ross. In the first entry, we learned that management sent him out to the northern habitats to clean up some vomit from one of the children who ate too much. He feels like he's being persecuted. He doesn't understand why they picked him again. When he got back to the maintenance area, he found Tomlinson and Fremke sitting in the break room talking quietly. But the moment he entered the room, they both nervously looked up, stopped talking, and left. He thinks that something is definitely going on. Why he's recording his suspicions on a publicly available terminal is another question entirely. In the next entry, we learned that his coworker Fremke called in sick that day, so poor old Ross had to go to the Reptile house to change some of the lights. But it took him over an hour since the place was absolutely crowded while he was trying to work. While he was putting the equipment back in the shed, he saw Fremke, who was supposed to be out sick, and Tomlinson sitting in Fremke's car. Fremke handed something over, and then Tomlinson got out and walked away. Ross decided to take it upon himself to get to the bottom of this. In the next entry, we learned that Ross decided to place a holotape recorder in the empty locker next to Fremke's. He didn't get anything for days, but finally he scored big when he picked up a conversation between Fremke and Tomlinson. They were talking about something called Project Cobalt. Ross has no idea what this is. After all, they never tell the janitors anything. But he's upset because he feels left out. In his final note, we learn that his work orders keep piling up. But this deal with Project Cobalt was bothering him so much that he ignored his work and decided to finally confront Fremke personally. Fremke tried to lie his way out of the whole thing, but he finally gave in and told him that it was a super secret joint cooperation between the United States military and Nuka World. Ross couldn't believe it. What in the world could Nuka World have that the military would need, he wonders. He just had to know more, but Fremke told him to drop it. This was a clear warning, but Ross says, to hell with that guy. I'm taking this directly to Brad Burton himself. The final entry is not by Ross. It's by Fremke. He says, it's been 2 weeks since Ross asked me about Cobalt. I told that idiot to drop it, but he just wouldn't listen. Then, all of a sudden, our department gets notice that Ross is taking an unscheduled vacation, and no one seems to know where he's gone. Now they want me to purge his terminal before the end of October. I hate to wipe all of this out, but I can't refuse. If I don't do what the security department says, I may end up on vacation too. Does this mean that Brad Burton is kidnapping and potentially killing employees who learn too much? I encourage you to check out my video on Project Cobalt. I linked to it earlier, and I'll link to it in the description of this video. It's a fascinating project, and even though Ross was confused, at the very end, we finally understand why the military wanted to work with a cola company. To leave the maintenance tunnel, we can go through a hatch and then wind our way all the way back to the primate house to deal with Cito and his family. Once there, we can tell Cito that we've killed all the monsters.
New friend done? No more monsters?
Apart from your hideous family, yeah. I think the monsters here are gone.
New friend make bad joke. No worry. Cito think funny.
Can't you tell?
Cito not see more monsters.
There'll always be other monsters, but you've seen the last of the ones that were here.
Cito not worry. New friend teach Cito be strong. Teach Cito be brave.
And they should not be coming back. Your family's safe, Cito.
Cito so happy. How Cito thank new friend.
What's next for you, Cito? You want to stay here? Or take your family and head out to the wasteland?
Zoo Cito home since small. Zoo family home since forever. Cito want to stay. Wasteland not safe for Cito family. Or Cito.
Cito asked us what to do next. We asked him what he wanted to do. He says he wants to stay, but he'll do whatever we tell him to do. And we have three options. We can tell him to eat a bullet.
Sorry, Cito. I've got other friends moving into the zoo. And you'll just get in the way.
You betray Cito? You enemy now!
Choosing this option causes Cito and all of his family members to turn hostile. This is an incredibly difficult fight, especially if we passed the speech check earlier to have Chris accompany us. But if we kill Cito, and then if we kill all of the ghoul-rillas, we can loot the wild man rags from Cito's corpse, and on the gorillas we find a bunch of ghoul-rilla meat. Since these are the only ghoul-rillas we find in the game, this ghoul-rilla meat is incredibly rare. I went outside and ran to that cooking station inside the diner, hoping that with the gorilla meat in my inventory I found a new cooking option. But sadly it looks like we can't cook the ghoul-rilla meat. There's no recipe that uses it. But let's assume for a moment that we don't want to kill Cito and his entire family. Our next option is to convince him and his family that the safari adventure is no longer safe for them.
Listen, Cito. You and your family have to get out of here. Mean people are coming, and they might hurt you or your family.
Cito sad, but Cito understand. Home too dangerous now. Cito take family and go.
If we choose this option, we get a reward, and Cito and his family hangs out here in the primate house for a few more days. But when we return in a few days' time, they're all gone. The final option requires that we pass a yellow speech check, where we ask him to share the park with our raider friends.
I have some friends moving in here. But if you play it cool, we can all get along. Can you do that?
Cito no trust anyone but new friend. Cito not share home.
And if we pass the speech check,
Cito trust you. Cito like more new friends. Before go, here, new friend take. It better shiny thing Cito say. Cito want to give. Thank you, new friend. Cito always remember you.
we get Cito's Shiny Slugger, a unique legendary melee baseball bat that refills our action points on a critical hit. This was the reason I brought this character to the Safari adventure to begin with at such a low level. This melee weapon is amazing, especially for a character who depends so heavily upon VATs. Plus, we can upgrade this baseball bat like any other baseball bat at any weapons workbench. If we choose this option, then Cito and his family will hang out here inside the Primate House. Thankfully, they won't have to cross paths with any of the Nuka World raiders because the raiders never enter the Primate House. Finally, if we have been tasked by the Nuka World raider bosses to clear these zones for the raiders, we can then climb up on top of the big triangle house, the Welcome Center, to hoist the flag of the desired raider faction that we want to live here. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the full story of the Safari adventure. It's interesting because here we find a piece of remarkable technology, and we don't destroy it. We have the option to turn the replicator on or off, but sadly it's only ever programmed to replicate a Gatorclaw. But what if we could program this to replicate synths? Even if we chose to destroy the Institute, couldn't we use a machine like this to produce a steady stream of synths? Or what if we wanted to clone ourselves a super mutant army? Or what if we had more peaceful intentions and we just wanted to clone ourselves some Brahmin for our farms to give ourselves a dependable, steady stream of meat? This machine is remarkable, and if utilized by some of our settlements in the Commonwealth, could revolutionize the way farms work. But sadly, we don't have any options to do that with the replicator. It remains an amazing piece of technology, switched off, buried in a laboratory inside this amusement park. But who knows? Maybe this technology will be harnessed by someone else in a future Fallout game. What are your thoughts on the Safari adventure? And what do you think of the replicator? Do you think it's an amazing piece of technology like I do? Or do you think it's rather ho-hum? And what are your thoughts on A.F.A.D? Do you sympathize with them? Do you think they had a point? Do you agree with them that Nuka World was torturing these animals? Or do you think that A.F.A.D's methods for getting their point across were hypocritical? Do you see them as fanatics, as Brad Burton and all of Nuka World clearly did? Let me know in the comments section below. I read all of your comments and I use your comments as inspiration for my future videos. I publish a new video 6 days a week, so if you want to make sure that you don't miss my next video, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I've got a t-shirt shop, folks. If you would like to find an Oxhorn or a Fallout themed t-shirt, you can find a link to my shop in the description below. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers gain access to a private channel on my Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, with a brand new video.